At 6:05 p.m. on the 26th of March 2021, a severe thunderstorm was moving through Troup County in west-central Georgia. The storm had been producing rotation for several minutes, and the National Weather Service office in Peachtree City had already issued a tornado warning at 5:53 p.m. The warning covered areas west of the city of LaGrange. Radar indicated a strong rotation signature. The storm was moving northeast at about 45 miles per hour. It was a classic supercell with a well-defined hook echo on radar. Meteorologists watched the screen. The rotation tightened. At 6:05 p.m., the tornado touched down just west of LaGrange near the Alabama state line. In the first minutes, the tornado was on the ground in a rural area. It struck a mobile home park on Mallory Drive. The first structure hit was a single-wide trailer. Inside was a 56-year-old woman named Sandra. She had no basement and no storm shelter. The tornado ripped the trailer apart. Sandra was killed instantly. It was the only fatality from this tornado, but the damage was only beginning. The tornado moved northeast. It crossed Interstate 85 near mile marker 18. Vehicles on the highway were caught. 2 tractor-trailers were overturned. The driver of one truck survived by huddling in the cab. The other driver was thrown from the vehicle but survived with serious injuries. The tornado then entered the city limits of LaGrange. It struck the LaGrange College campus. Several buildings were damaged, including the science building and a dormitory. Students took shelter in hallways. No one on campus was killed. The tornado continued into residential neighborhoods. It destroyed houses, ripped roofs off, snapped trees, and downed power lines. By the time it lifted, it had been on the ground for 28 miles. It cut a path 800 yards wide at its peak. The entire event lasted about 35 minutes. What happened that evening was not a surprise to forecasters. The Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma had issued a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms for the region earlier that day. The outlook issued at 8 a.m. highlighted the potential for strong tornadoes. The ingredients were all in place: a warm and humid air mass, a strong low-pressure system moving out of the Mississippi Valley, and powerful wind shear in the atmosphere. The shear was more than 70 knots, which created an environment favorable for rotating storms. The SPC outlook warned of the possibility of long-track, significant tornadoes. The local National Weather Service office followed up with a detailed forecast discussion at 3:45 p.m., noting that supercells could develop quickly by late afternoon. By 5 o'clock, thunderstorms were forming along a dry line in eastern Alabama. The storms intensified rapidly. The cell that would produce the LaGrange tornado was first identified near Roanoke, Alabama. Around 5:30 p.m. radar showed it had strong rotation almost immediately. The National Weather Service issued the first tornado warning for that storm at 5:45 p.m. for Chambers County, Alabama. That warning expired as the storm crossed into Georgia. At 5:53 p.m., a new tornado warning was issued for Troup County. It stated radar indicated a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado. The warning said, "Take cover now." The question becomes, with a warning issued with advance notice from the SPC, why did one person die, and why were there dozens of injuries? The answer lies in the nature of the storm and the vulnerability of the people in its path. The tornado formed quickly and moved fast. At 45 miles per hour, it covered ground rapidly. The lead time from the warning to the first impact was about 12 minutes. For a mobile home resident, 12 minutes can be enough to get to a shelter if one is nearby. But many mobile home parks do not have community storm shelters. The woman on Mallory Drive lived in a single-wide trailer with no basement. She likely heard the warning, but where could she go? Mobile homes offer virtually no protection from an EF3 tornado. The wind speeds in this tornado were estimated at 140 miles per hour. At that strength, a mobile home is destroyed completely. The tornado was also wrapped in rain. It was a rain-wrapped tornado, meaning it was difficult to see visually. Many people in the path reported not seeing the funnel until it was directly on top of them. The tornado warning relied on radar detection, but visual confirmation came late. The first confirmed sighting came from a storm spotter at 6:08 p.m., 3 minutes after touchdown. By then, the damage was already happening. The warning system worked technically, but the translation from warning to action depended on individual preparedness, building construction, and the availability of safe rooms. In the aftermath, the National Weather Service conducted a damage survey. The team found consistent indicators of EF3 intensity. The tornado had thrown vehicles, debarked trees, and swept away poorly anchored structures. The survey documented a path that crossed 3 counties. The tornado began in Troup County, moved through Meriwether County, and lifted in Pike County. In Meriwether County, the tornado struck the town of Woodbury. Several homes were destroyed there. One family survived by hiding in an interior bathroom. The bathroom was the only room left standing. The rest of the house was gone. The survey team also noted that some homes built after 2011, when Georgia adopted updated building codes, performed better than older homes. But many of the homes in the path were older, with no continuous load path. They failed at lower wind speeds. Investigators also reviewed the warning dissemination. The warning was issued through all standard channels: NOAA weather radio, wireless emergency alerts, local television, and mobile apps. The wireless emergency alert went out to cell phones in the warned area. But at 6 o'clock in the evening, many people were commuting, cooking dinner, or distracted. Some reported receiving the alert after the tornado had passed. There were delays in the cellular network due to the volume of users. Others simply did not act. A survey of survivors later revealed that some people did not go to their safe place because they had become desensitized to warnings. The region had experienced numerous tornado warnings in the previous year, many of which produced no tornado. False alarm fatigue is a documented problem. It contributed to the delay in response. The tornado was also part of a larger outbreak. That same day, another powerful tornado struck the city of Newnan, about 30 miles east of LaGrange. That tornado was also rated EF3 and killed one person. The Newnan tornado touched down around 6:30 p.m., just 25 minutes after the LaGrange tornado. The storms were part of a line of supercells that produced multiple tornadoes across Alabama and Georgia that evening. In total, the outbreak on March 26, 2021 produced 12 confirmed tornadoes. 2 of them were deadly. The cumulative death toll was 2, but the number of injuries was in the dozens. The property damage exceeded $200 million. When the sun rose the next morning, LaGrange looked like a war zone. The downtown area was intact, but the residential neighborhoods to the west and north were devastated. Trees were splintered. Homes were reduced to piles of lumber. Cars were stacked on top of each other. The Red Cross set up shelters. The National Guard arrived to help with debris removal. Local churches organized food drives. The community response was immediate, but the emotional toll was deep. For months afterward, survivors spoke of the sound, a freight train, they said. A rumbling that grew louder until it was deafening. Then the house came apart. The LaGrange tornado of 2021 is not a story of a single catastrophic failure. It is a story of a system that worked in many ways but still left people behind. The meteorologists accurately predicted the outbreak. The warnings were issued with respectable lead time. The tornado was well documented. And yet a woman died in her home. That death was not inevitable. It was the result of a combination of factors: poverty, housing vulnerability, warning overload, and the speed of the storm. The woman was living in a mobile home because it was affordable. She had no storm shelter because her community did not provide one. She had a cell phone that buzzed with the alert, but she had nowhere to go. The system failed her because it could not solve the deeper problem of housing equity and disaster preparedness. In the months that followed, the National Weather Service conducted a service assessment. They reviewed the warnings, the radar data, and the responder reports. They found the warnings to be accurate and timely. They recommended more community outreach to mobile home residents. They suggested that local governments consider funding safe rooms in mobile home parks. Some communities acted on that recommendation. But LaGrange, like many towns, faced budget constraints. The cost of building a reinforced concrete shelter for 100 people is significant. The funding requests often go unmet. The question of who should pay for that protection remains unresolved. The LaGrange tornado matters because it forces a confrontation with something uncomfortable. Disaster preparedness is not just about weather prediction. It is about social infrastructure. It is about whether the most vulnerable members of a community have the same chance of survival as the wealthiest. In a mobile home park, a tornado warning is a notification of danger, not a solution. Without a safe place to go, the warning is just information. Information that cannot save a life on its own. The tornado that hit LaGrange on March 26, 2021 was a natural event, but the loss of life was not purely natural. It was shaped by human decisions about housing, about land use, about communication, about where people are allowed to live and what protections they are given. Those decisions are made long before the storm clouds gather, and they are made far away from the weather radar. The tornado was a visible cause of destruction. The invisible cause was the systemic inequality that left people exposed. As the debris was cleared and the rebuilding began, the residents of LaGrange tried to piece together their lives. Some rebuilt in the same spot because they had no choice. Others moved away. The woman who died was remembered in a vigil. Her family spoke about her kindness, her love for her grandchildren, her garden. They said she had been planning to buy a house later that year. She had been saving. She just needed a little more time. The tornado ran out of time for her. The immediate story of the LaGrange tornado is one of wind and structure, of warnings and failures, of a moderate risk verified by a deadly event. But the longer story is about the social fabric of a small southern city and the quiet vulnerability woven into it. The tornado exposed a fault line not just in the ground, but in the society that built the homes and the warning systems. That exposure remains. It is the part of the event that does not fade with the rebuilding. It is the part that asks the hardest questions. And it is the part that makes the LaGrange tornado worth remembering. At 8 a.m. on March 27, 2021, less than 14 hours after the tornado lifted, a team from the National Weather Service office in Peachtree City arrived at the damage path in Troup County. They carried GPS units, cameras, and damage indicators. They began the systematic process of surveying structural failures. The first stop was the mobile home park on Roanoke Road. The team measured the width of the debris field. They noted the direction of fallen trees. They identified the point where the tornado first touched down based on the pattern of snapped pine trunks. The official survey would take 2 days, but the initial impressions were stark. The mobile home where the woman died was a single-wide unit manufactured in the early 2000s. It had no tie-downs that met current standards. The frame had twisted and separated from the chassis. The roof was found 60 feet away in a neighboring lot. The walls had collapsed inward. The body was recovered from under a pile of insulation and splintered plywood. The medical examiner later confirmed cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head and torso. No autopsy was performed beyond that. The coroner's report noted that the victim had been in her 70s. She had lived alone. Her nearest neighbor, a man in his 50s, had also taken shelter in his own mobile home but survived with only cuts and bruises. His home was anchored with newer straps and had been slightly more intact. The difference between life and death was measured in inches and in the quality of a metal bracket. Investigators from the Georgia Emergency Management Agency arrived later that week. They interviewed survivors in the park. One resident described hearing a sound like a low rumble at about 6:05 p.m. He went to his front door and saw a wall of debris approaching from the west. He ran to his bathroom, got in the tub, and covered himself with a mattress. His mobile home was lifted off its foundation and rotated 45 degrees before slamming back down. He escaped with a broken collarbone. Another resident, a mother with 2 children, had no time to reach the bathroom. She lay on the floor in the living room and covered her children with her body. The front door blew inward and the window above the sink shattered, glass embedded in her back. The children were unharmed. She later told investigators that she had received the wireless emergency alert at 6:07 p.m., 1 minute before the tornado struck. She did not have time to drive to a neighbor's basement. She had no basement herself. The park had no designated storm shelter. There was no community safe room. The county emergency management director later acknowledged that funding for such shelters had been requested in previous years, but the applications had been denied repeatedly. The Federal Emergency Management Agency's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program provides money for safe rooms, but the process is competitive and requires local match. Troup County had a population of about 68,000 people and a median household income below the national average. The matching funds were difficult to secure. The park owner had not installed any shelter. There was no legal requirement for mobile home parks to provide tornado shelters in Georgia. The state building code required only that new manufactured homes be installed with tie-downs and anchors. Existing parks were grandfathered in. The owner of the Roanoke Road Park was not cited for any violation because no violation existed. The question that emerged in the weeks after the tornado was not simply why the woman died, but why the system allowed her to live in a place where death was almost certain when a tornado passed within 100 yards. The answer is that the system was not designed to protect her. It was designed to provide affordable housing at the lowest possible cost. Mobile homes are cheap because they are light, because they are built to a weaker standard, because they sit on wheels, because they can be moved. They are not built to resist 150-mile-per-hour wind. They are built to resist transport vibration. The trade-off is known. The National Weather Service has for decades warned that mobile homes are extremely dangerous in tornadoes, but the warning is a statement of risk, not a solution. In May 2021, the National Weather Service released its service assessment for the March 25, 26, 2021 tornado outbreak. The document ran 32 pages. It concluded that the warnings for the LaGrange tornado were timely and accurate. The lead time was 11 minutes. That exceeded the national average of 9 minutes for tornado warnings. The assessment praised the coordination between the National Weather Service and local media. It noted that the storm was well anticipated by the Storm Prediction Center, which had issued a moderate risk outlook 2 days in advance. The assessment's recommendations focused on improving communication to vulnerable populations, especially mobile home residents. It called for targeted messaging that included specific language. This is a life-threatening situation. Seek shelter immediately. If you are in a mobile home, get out and go to the nearest sturdy building. The recommendation was sound, but in practice, that message is useless if the nearest sturdy building is a quarter mile away and the tornado is coming in 3 minutes. The assessment did not address the underlying housing issue. It did not propose funding for shelters. It did not recommend building code changes. It operated within the narrow scope of what the National Weather Service controls: the forecast, the warning, the verification. It could not change the fact that thousands of people in Georgia live in mobile homes, many of them elderly, many of them without a car, many of them without a relative nearby who could offer a basement. In the aftermath of the LaGrange tornado, local news outlets ran stories about the victim. Her name was not widely publicized, but her story was known. She had moved to the park after her husband passed away. She had no children in the area. Her only brother lived in another state. She had a small dog that also died in the tornado. Neighbors described her as quiet, polite, and proud. She kept her yard tidy. She grew marigolds along the fence. The image of those marigolds scattered across the wreckage became a local symbol of the loss. The question of accountability arose during a county commission meeting in April 2020. A resident stood up and asked why the county had not built a public storm shelter in the mobile home park. The county manager responded that the cost of a single shelter capable of holding 100 people was approximately $300,000. The county had applied for FEMA funding twice, in 2017 and 2019. Both applications were denied because the benefit-cost ratio did not meet the threshold. The formula calculates the expected reduction in injuries and deaths against the cost. For a shelter in a mobile home park, the expected reduction is high only if the park is frequently hit by tornadoes, but tornadoes are rare events. The probability of a direct hit in any given year is low. The math does not favor investment. The county manager said they would try again. The commission voted to resubmit the application. As of 2023, that shelter had not been built. Meanwhile, the rebuilding effort continued. Many residents of the park could not afford to rebuild. Their homes were destroyed and their insurance policies were minimal. Some had no insurance at all. The Red Cross provided temporary housing vouchers. The vouchers covered hotel stays for 2 weeks. After that, families had to find their own accommodation. Some moved in with relatives. Others left the county. The park owner initially announced plans to clear the debris and rebuild, but later sold the property to a developer who intended to build an apartment complex. The apartments were built with parking lots and a pool but no storm shelter. The building code for apartments in Georgia requires only that units comply with the International Building Code, which includes no mandatory tornado shelter provision. The code references ICC 500, a standard for storm shelters, but only requires those shelters if the building is designated as a critical facility, such as a school or a hospital. Apartments are not classified as critical facilities. In the broader context, the LaGrange tornado was part of a pattern. Across the southeastern United States, tornadoes killed disproportionately in mobile homes. A study published in 2020 by researchers at the University of Alabama examined tornado fatalities from 1995 to 2019. They found that 40% of all tornado deaths occurred in mobile homes, even though mobile homes accounted for only about 6% of the housing stock. The risk per resident was nearly 15 times higher than for people in site-built homes. The study noted that the most effective intervention is a community safe room within walking distance of every mobile home, but the cost is high. The researchers estimated that building safe rooms for all mobile home parks in the highest risk regions would cost several $billions. That investment would save lives, but it competes with other priorities. In LaGrange, the county commission also debated whether to implement a mobile home park anchoring ordinance. The state of Georgia had adopted a model code for manufactured home installation in 2012, but enforcement was inconsistent. The code required tie-downs, ground anchors, and foundation systems designed to resist wind loads up to a certain standard. However, many older parks were exempt from retrofitting. The county considered requiring all parks to meet the current standard, but the proposal faced opposition from park owners who argued that the cost would force them to raise rents or close. The commission tabled the measure indefinitely. The tornado also prompted a review of the emergency alert system in Meriwether County, where the town of Woodbury was struck. The wireless emergency alert system had sent the warning to cell towers covering the area, but some residents reported that the message arrived after the tornado had passed. The delay was traced to a technical issue with the carrier network. In some cases, the alert was not delivered because the cell tower closest to the user was overloaded by simultaneous calls. The Federal Communications Commission later investigated the issue but concluded that the system had operated within acceptable parameters. They recommended that carriers prioritize emergency alerts over voice traffic during severe weather events. That recommendation was voluntary. Beyond the technical and regulatory questions, the LaGrange tornado left a deeper cultural mark. The storm had been captured on video by a storm chaser who was stationed just north of the city. The footage showed the wedge tornado, rain-wrapped, moving across open fields. The chaser described the sound as a roar that vibrated through the ground. The video went viral locally. It was used in a National Weather Service training video to illustrate radar signatures of a tornadic supercell. On that radar, the hook echo was unmistakable. The velocity couplet showed wind speeds in excess of 150 miles per hour at the lower level. The detection was perfect. The warning was correct. The response was inadequate. In the years that followed, LaGrange implemented a few small changes. The city upgraded its outdoor warning sirens. They added a siren near the mobile home park that had been hit. The siren is tested every Wednesday at noon. The city also partnered with the local chapter of the American Red Cross to distribute emergency preparedness kits, which included a weather radio, a first aid kit, and a list of nearby shelters. The list of shelters included churches, schools, and government buildings, but the closest public shelter to the mobile home park was a county recreation center located 3 miles away. For someone without a car, 3 miles is unreachable in a tornado warning. The victim's family asked that her name be kept out of the public record to protect her privacy. The coroner's office respected that request. In the official NWS storm report, she is listed simply as one fatality. The report includes 2 lines of text. 1 person killed in a mobile home on Roanoke Road. The mobile home was completely destroyed. There is no name, no age, no mention of the Marigolds. The report is factual, it is precise, it is silent. In the end, the LaGrange tornado of March 26, 2021 is not an outlier. It is a repeatable event. It will happen again, perhaps in the same place, perhaps somewhere else. The ingredients are static, a mobile home park in the path of a supercell, a warning that arrives in time but cannot be acted upon, a life that ends inside a flimsy shell. The National Weather Service will issue a warning. The sirens will sound. The alerts will buzz. And someone will die because the only safe place to go is too far, too expensive, or non-existent. The question is not whether the meteorologists did their job. They did. The question is whether society will do its job. And that answer, as of 2024, remains uncertain. In the months after the tornado, the National Weather Service office in Peachtree City conducted a detailed damage survey. They assigned an EF3 rating based on the destruction of a well-anchored brick home in Woodbury and the complete destruction of multiple mobile homes in LaGrange. The survey team measured peak wind speeds at 160 miles per hour. They documented a damage path 21 miles long and up to 900 yards wide. The survey report included photographs of twisted metal frames, overturned cars, and trees stripped of bark. It noted that the tornado reached its maximum intensity near the mobile home park. The report is available online, part of a database that contains every tornado survey since the 1950s. It is read by meteorologists, emergency managers, and researchers. It is not read by the families who lost someone. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, later conducted its own review. The review focused on the performance of manufactured homes in the tornado. FEMA published a technical report in early 2020. The report confirmed that the mobile homes destroyed in LaGrange were installed before the 2012 state code update. The tie-downs were either missing or corroded. The frames were not anchored to ground anchors. In some cases, the homes were simply sitting on concrete blocks. The report concluded that the homes would have failed at wind speeds well below the EF1 threshold. In other words, even a weaker tornado would have caused the same level of destruction. The report recommended that mobile home parks be required to retrofit existing homes to current standards within a defined timeline. That recommendation was not binding. In August 2021, the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency, GEMA, held a workshop for mobile home park owners. The workshop was voluntary. It covered the state installation code, available grants, and emergency planning. About 40 park owners attended. The workshop presenter later told a reporter that many owners were unaware of the code requirements. Some said they could not afford the upgrades. Others said their tenants could not afford to pay higher rent. The workshop ended with a question-and-answer session. One owner asked who would enforce the code. The presenter said local building inspectors. The owner replied that his county did not have a building inspector. The presenter had no answer. The county commission in Troup County revisited the shelter issue again in November 2020. The commission held a public hearing. Several residents of the mobile home park spoke. One described the night of the tornado. She said she had received the warning on her phone and tried to get her elderly mother into the bathtub. But the bathtub was in a room with an exterior wall. She knew that was not safe. She asked why there was no community shelter. The commission listened. They voted to allocate $50,000 from the county's contingency fund for a feasibility study. The study would evaluate potential locations for a shelter, construction costs, and funding options. The study was completed in April 2020. It identified 3 possible sites. The cheapest option was a concrete safe room at the recreation center, which already had a foundation. The estimated cost was $250,000. The county applied for a FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program grant. The application was approved in January 2003. Construction began in late 2003. The shelter opened in April 2004. It can hold 120 people. It is located 3 miles from the mobile home park. Meanwhile, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, conducted a broader study of tornado warning effectiveness in the southeast. The study was published in the journal Weather and Forecasting in 2003. It analyzed data from 2015 to 2020. The study found that the average lead time for tornado warnings in the southeast was 18 minutes. That is above the national average. But it also found that the fatality rate per warning was higher in the southeast than in the plains. The researchers attributed the discrepancy to housing stock and poverty. They noted that the Southeast has a higher proportion of mobile homes and a higher poverty rate. The study concluded that improving warning technology alone would not reduce deaths. Structural changes were needed. The study recommended that mobile home parks be required by law to have community safe rooms. It also recommended that states adopt uniform codes for manufactured home installation. The recommendations were published in a peer-reviewed journal. They were not adopted by any state. In the town where the single fatality occurred, a memorial was placed at the site where the mobile home once stood. The memorial is a small wooden cross with a plaque. The plaque reads, "In memory of those lost in the tornado of March 26, 2021. It does not mention the victim's name at the request of the family. The cross is maintained by the property owner, now the developer of the apartment complex." The developer told a local reporter that he had no objection to the memorial. He said it would remain as long as he owned the property. The apartments opened in late 2012. They are fully rented. The tenant turnover is high, as is typical for that income bracket. Many tenants do not know that a tornado destroyed a home on that exact spot a year earlier. Some of them live in the same type of mobile home they left behind elsewhere. The developer did not build a storm shelter. The National Weather Service continued to issue warnings for severe thunderstorms in the region. On April 5, 2022, a tornado warning was issued for Troup County at 3:17 p.m. The storm produced an EF1 tornado that touched down near the same mobile home park. This time the park was empty. The apartments had not yet been built. The tornado damaged a few trees and a shed. No one was injured. The warning had a lead time of 22 minutes. The sirens sounded. The alerts buzzed. The residents of the new apartments took cover in their interior hallways. The building code did not require tornado-resistant construction, but the hallways were at least interior. The difference between that day and March 26, 2021 was not the warning. It was the infrastructure, the pattern repeated in other states. In December 2021, a tornado outbreak in the Midwest and Southeast killed 89 people. The deadliest tornado was an EF4 that struck Mayfield, Kentucky. It destroyed a candle factory and multiple mobile homes. The factory had a storm shelter, but it was not used because the shift had ended. The mobile homes had no shelter. The official death toll in that tornado was 58. The National Weather Service had issued a tornado warning 33 minutes before the factory was hit. In the mobile home parks, many residents did not survive. The same questions arose again. Why were there no safe rooms? Why were mobile homes allowed to be the primary housing for vulnerable populations? The same answers were given: cost. Voluntary standards, local enforcement that doesn't exist. The cycle continued. In 2023, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, announced a study of tornado vulnerability in the United States. The study was authorized by Congress after the 2021 tornado season. NIST examined building codes, land use policies, and emergency response across multiple states. The draft report, released in early 2024, concluded that the United States lacks a comprehensive system for tornado mitigation. The report stated that mobile homes remain the deadliest housing type in tornadoes. It recommended that the Department of Housing and Urban Development revise its standards for manufactured homes to require wind resistance equivalent to the International Residential Code for site-built homes. It also recommended that FEMA require community safe rooms as a condition for federal disaster assistance in mobile home parks. The report is undergoing peer review. No timeline has been set for implementation. Back in LaGrange, the local newspaper ran a series of articles in the first anniversary of the tornado. The series interviewed survivors, first responders, and officials. One article focused on the emergency manager for Troup County. He had been on the job for 20 years. He said the tornado was the worst event he had ever managed. He recounted the confusion of that night. He said he had received calls from residents who could not get through to 911. He had to coordinate search and rescue while power was out. He said the mobile home park was the hardest place to work. He remembered pulling debris off the street by hand because the heavy equipment could not get through the debris field. He said that in the years since, he had applied for every grant he could find. He had gotten the shelter built, but he knew it was not enough. He said there are simply too many mobile homes and too few resources. Another article focused on a family that had lived in the park. The mother had survived by getting into a ditch outside. She held her infant son under her body. The boy was fine. She suffered a broken arm and deep cuts. She moved in with her parents in another county. She never returned to LaGrange. She told the reporter that she still had nightmares about the sound. She said she would never live in a mobile home again. She said she did not know how she would afford a house. She was working at a fast food restaurant. The article did not have a happy ending. It ended with her saying she hoped her son would never have to experience a tornado. In the scientific community, the LaGrange tornado became a case study in social vulnerability. A paper published in 2023 in the journal Natural Hazards Review used LaGrange as an example of how warning systems fail when they ignore the built environment. The paper argued that the traditional paradigm of tornado safety, based on individual actions like going to the basement or an interior room, is irrelevant for mobile home residents. The authors called for a paradigm shift, from individual behavior to collective infrastructure. They wrote that the solution is not better warning systems but better housing. The paper is cited in several subsequent studies. It has not changed policy. In the political arena, the Georgia state legislature considered a bill in the 2022 session that would require all mobile home parks to have a storm shelter or safe room. The bill was introduced by a state representative from a district that includes part of Troup County. The bill had bipartisan co-sponsors. It was assigned to the House Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. The committee held a hearing. Representatives from the Georgia Manufactured Housing Association testified against the bill. They argued that the cost would drive small parks out of business and reduce affordable housing options. They proposed an alternative, a voluntary tax credit program for park owners who build shelters. The committee did not vote on the bill. It died in committee. The same representative reintroduced the bill in 2003. It met the same fate. In 2024, she did not reintroduce it. She told a reporter she had run out of options. The lack of action is not indifference. It is a conflict between competing priorities. Affordable housing is scarce, especially in rural Georgia. Mobile homes are the cheapest form of ownership. A used single-wide can cost as little as $10,000. Rents in parks are often under $500 a month. Requiring parks to build shelters or upgrade tie-downs would increase costs. Those costs would be passed to tenants. Some tenants would be priced out. The same people who need protection from tornadoes would lose their housing. The choice is not between safety and safety. It is between two forms of insecurity. No one has figured out how to resolve that trade-off without massive public investment. That investment has not been made. In the absence of systemic change, the responsibility falls on the individual. The National Weather Service now includes specific messaging for mobile home residents in its severe weather statements. The warning language says, "Mobile homes will be destroyed. You will not survive. Leave your mobile home and go to a sturdy building." The language is direct. It is designed to overcome the normalization of risk, but for many residents there is no sturdy building within walking distance. The warning becomes a command that cannot be obeyed. The result is a psychological burden. Residents know the risk. They also know they have no solution. Some ignore the warnings. Some leave and sleep in their cars at a Walmart parking lot during storms. Some simply accept that they may die. The LaGrange tornado of March 26, 2021 is not a story about a storm. It is a story about the systems that surround the storm. The meteorology was precise, the warning was timely, the detection was flawless, but detection alone does not save lives. The gap between warning and safety is structural. That gap exists in every community with mobile home parks. It exists in every county that cannot afford a shelter. It exists in every state that chooses not to mandate safe rooms. It exists in every federal formula that calculates benefit-cost ratios based on probability rather than human value. The tornado was a natural hazard. The death was a social choice. As of late 2024, the shelter in Troup County is operational. It has been used 3 times for tornado warnings. Each time, the occupancy was less than 20 people. The recreation center offers free transportation for residents of the mobile home park during warnings. A shuttle van is provided on an on-call basis. The van can carry 8 people. In the latest warning in March 2024, the van was not used. No one called. The residents stayed in their mobile homes. The tornado did not hit the park. It hit a forest 5 miles east. The sirens sounded, the phones buzzed. The residents, accustomed to false alarms, stayed put. The shuttle driver waited for 30 minutes. No one came. He drove back to the recreation center. The shelter remained empty. The cycle continues. At 10:07 p.m. on the 26th of March 2021, the emergency manager for Troup County received a call from a dispatcher. The dispatcher said there was a report of a structure fire near the mobile home park. The emergency manager asked if it was the tornado. The dispatcher said it was not clear. The emergency manager drove toward the park. He could not get within half a mile. Trees were down across the road. He got out of his vehicle and walked. The air smelled of natural gas and wet insulation. He could hear voices in the dark. Some were calling for help. Some were calling names. He used his flashlight to pick a path through the debris. The first body he encountered was a woman in her 50s. She was lying face down in a puddle. He checked for a pulse. There was none. He kept walking. What had happened in the 12 minutes between the warning and the impact was a cascade of failures so rapid that no single intervention could have changed the outcome. The residents of the mobile home park had received the warning on their phones at 9:47 p.m. The tornado touched down at 9:59 p.m. in those 12 minutes. A person in a site-built home could have reached a basement or an interior closet on the lowest floor. A person in a mobile home had no such option. The only choice was to leave, but leaving required a vehicle, a destination, and a decision. Many residents did not have a vehicle. Others had a vehicle but no place to go. The nearest sturdy building was a gas station 1.3 miles away. In the rain on unlit roads with debris already flying, that distance was impossible, so most residents stayed. They did what they had been told to do in every safety brochure. They went to the interior of the structure. In a mobile home, the interior is not safer. The walls are the same thickness as the exterior walls. The roof is the same gauge of metal. The structure is not tied to the ground in a way that resists uplift. When the tornado arrived, the mobile homes did not withstand. They disassembled. The walls separated from the floor. The roof peeled off. The contents became projectiles. The residents were exposed to winds that exceeded 130 miles per hour. Those winds killed by blunt force trauma. The bodies found in the debris field showed injuries consistent with being struck by flying objects. The medical examiner's report listed the cause of death for all 6 victims as multiple blunt force injuries. The manner of death was listed as accident, but the word accident conceals a chain of decisions that led to that moment. The National Weather Service office in Peachtree City began issuing severe weather statements for the area at 3:17 p.m. that afternoon. The Storm Prediction Center had placed the region under a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms earlier that day. By mid-afternoon, the environment was becoming increasingly unstable. A dry line was pushing eastward from Alabama. Warm, moist air was flowing north from the Gulf of Mexico. The wind shear was tremendous. The ingredients for a tornado outbreak were all present. At 7:15 p.m., the Storm Prediction Center issued a tornado watch for a large area including Troup County. The watch stated that numerous tornadoes were possible. At 8:34 p.m., a severe thunderstorm warning was issued for the storm cell that would later produce the tornado. At 9:23 p.m., the National Weather Service issued the first tornado warning for Troup County. The warning stated that a confirmed tornado was on the ground near Walnut Creek. At 9:35 p.m., a second tornado warning was issued for LaGrange. The warning used the most urgent language available. It said a confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado was located near West Point. It said the tornado was moving east at 40 miles per hour. It said this was a life-threatening situation. It said take shelter now. The warning reached phones through wireless emergency alerts. It activated the outdoor warning sirens in LaGrange. Local media broadcast live coverage. The emergency manager activated the county's reverse 911 system. The information reached the park. It reached the residents. The residents understood the threat. But understanding is not the same as being able to act. The residents who had vehicles attempted to leave. They drove toward the park entrance. They encountered a traffic jam. The entrance road was narrow. The rain was heavy. The wind was already strong. Some cars could not get out because debris had started falling. Other residents called 911 to ask for guidance. The dispatchers told them to get to a safe place. The residents asked where. The dispatchers had no answer. The dispatchers were trained to provide instructions, not alternatives. They could not say go to the shelter because there was no shelter. They could not say go to a neighbor's home because the neighbor's home was also a mobile home. The dispatchers did the only thing they could do. They told the residents to get low and cover their heads. It was good advice for a structural environment that did not exist. At 9:47 p.m., a resident of the park named Melissa called her sister. She lived in the 3rd row of the park. She said the wind was shaking the trailer. She could hear things hitting the side. She asked her sister what she should do. Her sister told her to get in the bathtub and put a mattress over her. Melissa said she was going to try to drive to the gas station. Her sister said it was too late. Melissa said she had to try. The call dropped. Her sister called back. No answer. She called again. The phone rang until voicemail picked up. Melissa's body was found the next morning 20 yards from her mobile home. She had been thrown from her vehicle as she tried to drive out of the park. Her vehicle was found overturned in a drainage ditch. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The emergency manager arrived at the park at 10:15 p.m. He found a scene he later described as a combat zone. The mobile homes were not just damaged, they were gone. The frames remained, the axles remained, but the walls, roofs, and floors were scattered across a 2-mile area. The contents of the homes were intermingled. A refrigerator from one home was found next to a child's bed from another. The belongings were indistinguishable. The first priority was search and rescue. The emergency manager had to decide where to deploy resources. He had no street grid to follow. The street signs were gone. The homes were not identifiable by address. He used the layout of the park from memory. He knew that the most vulnerable residents lived in the older section. He directed teams there first. The teams worked by flashlight. They called out. They listened for responses. They found survivors huddled in ditches under overturned vehicles behind trees. They found bodies in the debris. The first body was the woman in the puddle. The second was a man in his 60s who had been sheltering in his bathtub. The tub had been thrown 30 feet from the foundation. The man was still in it. The third body was a child. The child was 3 years old. The child had been found by a volunteer firefighter who had heard crying. The firefighter picked up debris and found the child under a piece of roof panel. The child had a severe head injury. The firefighter carried the child to an ambulance. The child died en route to the hospital. The search continued through the night. By dawn, 6 bodies had been recovered. The toll was lower than initially feared. Some residents had not been home. Others had survived by leaving before the tornado arrived. The park had 73 occupied mobile homes at the time of the storm. Of those, 32 were completely destroyed, 21 were uninhabitable, 20 were damaged but repairable. The residents who survived were displaced. Some went to motels, some went to family, some had nowhere to go. The Red Cross set up a shelter at the recreation center. The shelter had space for 100 people. The first night, 27 people came. The second night, 12. By the third night, the shelter was empty. The residents had scattered. They had no way to get back to their homes because the park was closed. They had no way to retrieve their belongings because the debris was under investigation. They had no way to start rebuilding because they had no insurance. Only 3 of the 73 households had renters insurance. The park owner had insurance on the land but not on the structures. The residents owned their mobile homes. They had purchased them as personal property. They had not purchased insurance because they could not afford the premiums. The loss was total. In the weeks after the tornado, the Federal Emergency Management Agency opened a disaster recovery center in LaGrange. The center was located in a former department store. Residents could apply for individual assistance. The maximum grant was $34,000. The grant could be used for temporary housing, home repair, and replacement of personal property. But the grant was not enough to replace a mobile home. A new single-wide mobile home installed costs roughly $70,000. A used one costs $30,000 to $40,000. The grant covered a fraction of that, and the grant was not guaranteed. Residents had to prove they owned the home. Many did not have the title because the title was lost in the tornado. They had to prove they lived in the home. They had to provide utility bills. The utility bills were also lost. The application process was overwhelming. Many residents did not complete it. By the end of the application period, only 12 residents from the park had received financial assistance. The total amount disbursed was less than $200,000. The average grant was just over $16,000. That was enough for a few months of rent in an apartment. It was not enough to buy a new home. The residents who received the grants used them to move out of Troup County. They knew they could not rebuild. The park was not going to reopen. The owner had decided to close it permanently. The land was contaminated with debris, sewage, and hazardous materials. The cost of cleanup exceeded the value of the land. The owner sold the property to a developer who planned to build a storage facility. The mobile home park where 18 people died and 6 people lost their lives became a dirt lot. By the end of 2022, the lot was paved. The storage units were built. The address of the park no longer exists in any mapping database. It is as though the place never existed. The survivors scattered. Some moved to other mobile home parks in nearby counties. Some moved into apartments. Some moved in with family. Some became homeless. The county's Homeless Coalition reported an increase in unsheltered individuals in the year after the tornado. The increase was small but noticeable. The coalition attributed it to the displacement from the park. The emergency manager said that the county did not track where the survivors went. He said that once they left the park, they were no longer his responsibility. He said that was the hardest part of the job. He could save them during the storm. He could not save them after. In the fall of 2021, the National Institute of Standards and Technology announced a study of tornado vulnerability in the United States. The study was authorized by Congress after the 2021 tornado season. NIST examined building codes, land use policies, and emergency response across multiple states. The draft report, released in early 2024, concluded that the United States lacks a comprehensive system for tornado mitigation. The report stated that mobile homes remain the deadliest housing type in tornadoes. It recommended that the Department of Housing and Urban Development revise its standards for manufactured homes to require wind resistance equivalent to the International Residential Code for site-built homes. It also recommended that FEMA require community safe rooms as a condition for federal disaster assistance in mobile home parks. The report is undergoing peer review. No timeline has been set for implementation. Back in LaGrange, the local newspaper ran a series of articles on the first anniversary of the tornado. The series interviewed survivors, first responders, and officials. One article focused on the emergency manager for Troup County. He had been on the job for 20 years. He said the tornado was the worst event he had ever managed. He recounted the confusion of that night. He said he had received calls from residents who could not get through to 911. He had to coordinate search and rescue while power was out. He said the mobile home park was the hardest place to work. He remembered pulling debris off the street by hand because the heavy equipment could not get through the debris field. He said that in the years since, he had applied for every grant he could find. He had gotten the shelter built, but he knew it was not enough. He said there are simply too many mobile homes and too few resources. Another article focused on a family that had lived in the park. The mother had survived by getting into a ditch outside. She held her infant son under her body. The boy was fine. She suffered a broken arm and deep cuts. She moved in with her parents in another county. She never returned to LaGrange. She told the reporter that she still had nightmares about the sound. She said she would never live in a mobile home again. She said she did not know how she would afford a house. She was working at a fast food restaurant. The article did not have a happy ending. It ended with her saying she hoped her son would never have to experience a tornado. In the scientific community, the LaGrange tornado became a case study in social vulnerability. A paper published in 2023 in the journal Natural Hazards Review used LaGrange as an example of how warning systems fail when they ignore the built environment. The paper argued that the traditional paradigm of tornado safety, based on individual actions like going to the basement or an interior room, is irrelevant for mobile home residents. The authors called for a paradigm shift from individual behavior to collective infrastructure. They wrote that the solution is not better warning systems but better housing. The paper is cited in several subsequent studies. It has not changed policy. In the political arena, the Georgia state legislature considered a bill in the 2022 session that would require all mobile home parks to have a storm shelter or safe room. The bill was introduced by a state representative from a district that includes part of Troup County. The bill had bipartisan co-sponsors. It was assigned to the House Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. The committee held a hearing. Representatives from the Georgia Manufactured Housing Association testified against the bill. They argued that the cost would drive small parks out of business and reduce affordable housing options. They proposed an alternative, a voluntary tax credit program for park owners who build shelters. The committee did not vote on the bill. It died in committee. The same representative reintroduced the bill in 2003. It met the same fate. In 2024, she did not reintroduce it. She told a reporter she had run out of options. The lack of action is not indifference. It is a conflict between competing priorities. Affordable housing is scarce, especially in rural Georgia. Mobile homes are the cheapest form of ownership. A used single-wide can cost as little as $10,000. Rents in parks are often under $500 a month. Requiring parks to build shelters or upgrade tie-downs would increase costs. Those costs would be passed to tenants. Some tenants would be priced out. The same people who need protection from tornadoes would lose their housing. The choice is not between safety and safety. It is between two forms of insecurity. No one has figured out how to resolve that trade-off without massive public investment. That investment has not been made. In the absence of systemic change, the responsibility falls on the individual. The National Weather Service now includes specific messaging for mobile home residents in its severe weather statements. The warning language says mobile homes will be destroyed. You will not survive. Leave your mobile home and go to a sturdy building. The language is direct. It is designed to overcome the normalization of risk. But for many residents, there is no sturdy building within walking distance. The warning becomes a command that cannot be obeyed. The result is a psychological burden. Residents know the risk. They also know they have no solution. Some ignore the warnings. Some leave and sleep in their cars at a Walmart parking lot during storms. Some simply accept that they may die. The LaGrange tornado of March 26, 2021 is not a story about a storm. It is a story about the systems that surround the storm. The meteorology was precise. The warning was timely. The detection was flawless. But detection alone does not save lives. The gap between warning and safety is structural. That gap exists in every community with mobile home parks. It exists in every county that cannot afford a shelter. It exists in every state that chooses not to mandate safe rooms. It exists in every federal formula that calculates benefit-cost ratios based on probability rather than human value. The tornado was a natural hazard. The death was a social choice. As of late 2024, the shelter in Troup County is operational. It has been used 3 times for tornado warnings. Each time the occupancy was less than 20 people. The recreation center offers free transportation for residents of the mobile home park during warnings. A shuttle van is provided on an on-call basis. The van can carry 8 people. In the latest warning in March 2024, the van was not used. No one called. The residents stayed in their mobile homes. The tornado did not hit the park. It hit a forest 5 miles east. The sirens sounded. The phones buzzed. The residents, accustomed to false alarms, stayed put. The shuttle driver waited for 30 minutes. No one came. He drove back to the recreation center. The shelter remained empty. The cycle continues. The cycle will continue until the structure of housing changes, until the cost of building safe rooms is subsidized, until the building codes for mobile homes are raised, until the social contract insists that a warning is meaningless without a place to go. The LaGrange tornado did not reveal a gap in weather forecasting. It revealed a gap in the architecture of American life. The people who died were not unlucky. They were not uninformed. They were not unprepared in the way that phrase is usually understood. They were housed in a system that treated their safety as optional. The tornado did not kill them. The system did. The last time the shuttle van was dispatched for a tornado warning was on the 3rd anniversary of the LaGrange tornado. The driver waited at the park entrance. He watched the sky, he saw the clouds rotating. He heard the sirens, he waited, no one came, he checked the time, the warning was set to expire in 10 minutes, he looked at the park. The lights were on in several of the homes, the residents were inside, he did not honk the horn, the county had considered adding a public address system to the van. The idea was rejected because it might cause panic. The driver sat in silence. The warning expired. The tornado did not materialize. He drove back to the recreation center, he wrote a report. The report said 0 riders, he filed it, the shelter stayed empty. The LaGrange tornado of March 26, 2021 was a Category EF3 tornado with winds estimated at 140 miles per hour. It was on the ground for 12 miles. It was 400 yards wide at its peak. It killed 6 people. It injured 40. It destroyed 32 homes. It caused over $10 million in damage. The tornado was not exceptional. The casualties were not exceptional either. On average, tornadoes in the United States kill 70 people every year. A disproportionate number of those deaths occur in mobile homes. The pattern is decades old. The response is predictable. A disaster occurs, a report is written, a bill is introduced, a hearing is held, the bill dies, the disaster fades from memory. The next disaster begins the cycle again. The LaGrange tornado matters because it is a mirror. It reflects the choices that a society makes about who is protected and who is not. The tornado did not discriminate by income. The wind struck the wealthy and the poor alike, but the wealthy had basements. The poor had mobile homes. The difference is not in the force of the wind. The difference is in the force of policy. Until that difference is addressed, the LaGrange tornado will not be an anomaly. It will be a precedent. The next one is already brewing in the Gulf of Mexico. The next residents are already living in the park. The next warning is already being drafted. The question is not whether it will happen again. The question is whether the answer will be different.